You know, it's good to feel dedicated to somebody that you look up to, but when they turn into a murderous monster, maybe it's time to just let them go. Hello everybody and welcome to another light novel review. I am Justus, and on this channel I cover all things light novels, reviews, news, countdowns of what's popular in Japan. So if you like light novels or you're just starting to get interested in them, you should consider subscribing. In today's video I'm going to be reviewing volume number 1 of Sorcerous Stabber Orphen, The Wayward Journey. This one by Yoshinobu Akita, and this is released in English by J-Novel Club. It's currently available only in ebook format. If you want to pick yourself up a copy, I've got a link to Amazon in the description down below. Now, Sorcerous Stabber Orphen is an older light novel. In fact, it was first published back in 1994. It has 20 volumes in the main storyline, and that is what J-Novel Club has licensed. There was a side story light novel series that started, I believe, around 1996. It was about 13 volumes long, and there was a sequel series that was done set after this main series. Again, those two series J-Novel at this point has not licensed. They have only licensed the main series, which again is 20 volumes long. I mean, it's still plenty of Sorcerous Stabber Orphen to scratch that itch. This one, of course, like I said, released back in 1994, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about context in terms of when this book was released, just so you get an idea about what kind of book this is and where it's coming from, because it's funny how there's still enough of the tropey type stuff that you'll recognize from anime and light novels and such in it, but it lacks some of the things we see often in light novels nowadays, which in some ways makes it a little bit different. Oddly, that it's so old, it feels a little bit fresh. Kind of funny how that happens. So to put this in context, in 1988, Record of Lodoss War released in Japan, and that probably was one of the big precursors of the whole light novel movement, and kind of combining this idea of, I mean, Lodoss War itself was basically born out of a tabletop gaming session of D&D. So Lodoss War, at this point, it gets released in 1988. Slayers, which of course is probably the banner for light novels, the beginning of light novels as they are generally known, came out in 1990. Now, so Sorcerous Stabber Orphen only comes out 6 years after Lodoss War, 4 years after Slayers, and funny enough, Slayers started getting an anime a year after Sorcerous Stabber Orphen. So just to kind of give you the context of where this book sits in these early kind of very heavy fantasy based light novels and novels that come out in Japan, it's kind of in that very first group that we see and that they get anime based on them in the 1990s. For instance, Lodoss War, now in 1990 it got an OVA based on its first novel, which was The Grey Witch, but it had a TV series, but that TV series didn't come out until like 1997 or so. So after you have Slayers hitting as an anime, after you have Orphen being published, and then Orphen gets its own anime in like 1998. And Orphen had 2 seasons of anime. Now, when they did seasons back then, they were actual seasons of 24 episodes. So Orphen does have a 47 episode long anime. The anime covered the first volume of this series, but the majority of the episodes were original to the anime itself. They didn't really draw a lot on the material from the light novels. Add into this that one of the sort of hallmarks of Japanese role-playing games in terms of console gaming, Final Fantasy, came out in 1987, only 7 years before Orphen came out. So the thing about this, and why I'm telling you all of these things, is because Sorcerous Stabber Orphen is really far more rooted in fantasy novels, and if anything in anime from the 1990s, than it is in video games, which we see heavily influencing light novels pretty much since, well, around the early mid-2000s and onward. characters don't level up, they don't earn skill points or anything like that. There's no trying to shoehorn a game mechanic into a living world kind of thing. If anything, this relies a lot more heavily on your very classic Lord of the Rings, Sword of Shannara type fantasy novels where you have characters who are just strong, and to get stronger they learn new abilities, they find new equipment, they train. I mean, it's just a more organic and natural acting world than a lot of the fantasy worlds that we have in light novels now, where they've found a way to try and work in sort of the quick fix of game mechanics. It also means that when you're talking about it relying a lot more on anime, you'll notice that some of the characters are very rooted in that sort of early mid-90s type anime. So we have Claliome, who is the plucky young girl that tags along after the hero and wants to be useful to him and is sure of herself, and you know that probably eventually she and the hero are going to fall in love, and she probably will become pretty useful as time goes by. You have the annoying hanger-on, Velcon, who is a dwarf and is the character that pretty much regularly cusses out and belittles and talks a lot of crap about the hero, but ultimately he's a useless coward who is used more for comedic relief. How well that succeeds in this book is probably up to you. Probably it works a lot more often when he's the object of the abuse. For instance, I laughed out loud when Orphen literally used him as a projectile against his enemies at one point. And so you have characters that you'll recognize from anime, like I said, especially if you're well versed in anime from the 90s. But again, you're not going to get a lot of these game mechanics, which is nice. It was kind of nice just to read a pure fantasy type series. In this first novel, we catch up with Orphen, who has left the Tower of Fangs, which is this, well, I guess it's a school would be the easiest thing to call it, essentially, that teaches sorcerers. And the whole thing is that Orphen has left that location because a girl who was several years older than him, he looked up to her as sort of an older sister type figure. He aspired to be as strong as she was. Well, she started experimenting with some bad mojo and turned into this big, ugly, nasty dragon. And so the school basically was like, she's dead to us, and we're gonna kill the dragon so nobody knows that this kind of looped out stuff happens in our school. Well, Orphen's having none of that, and so he leaves the school in hopes that he can find her and potentially protect her and maybe even turn her back. Now, as we catch up with Orphen, it's 5 years after he's left the Tower of Fangs, and, well, he's involved with these two dwarves, Vulcan, who I've already mentioned, and Vulcan's really unfortunate younger brother, Dorton. Dorton is your stereotypical nerdy character. He's got the big honkin' ridiculous glasses and often grumbles about all the things that has to put up with because of his stupid older brother, but never actually says anything because it'll probably just be more abuse, and poor Dorton is usually the object of Vulcan's abuse. Yeah, well, Orphen ends up with these dwarves because Orphen decided to try and make money by being a money lender, and yeah, the dwarves owe him a crap ton of cash. And so he keeps getting looped into their little schemes to try and make money so they can actually pay him back. One of these schemes is to try and pose as a merchant to hook up with a local rich single girl. Well, this kind of turns out to be pretty lucky for Orphen, because it turns out that Azalea, the girl that he's been searching for, well, the dragon or monster he's been searching for, ends up attacking this mansion while he's there. And it sets off a chain of events where Orphen ends up running into former classmates and a teacher from the Tower of Fangs and becoming involved in this whole plan to try and hunt down and to finally destroy Azalea. And of course, Orphen's having none of that, so it's all about him trying to figure out a way that he can help her and set things right. And it's just got a lot of action, and there's plenty of magic battles in it. But what really makes this book work is the ending of the book. Now, I'll talk about the ending in just a moment, but I just want to sort of touch on Orphen, the main character, because I've talked a little bit about the others. Orphen is, first of all, a little bit older than our average light novel protagonist is nowadays. He's in his 20s, and of course he's not at school any longer. He's living as an adult, trying to make his way in the world basically by picking up odd jobs and using spare change and the goodwill of the people that he meets to try and get by. But his main drive in this whole thing is, of course, his relationship with Azalea. And what I liked about that relationship was that it wasn't as something as simple and in some ways trivial as, oh, I was in love with her, she was my first love, or I'm still in love with her. It really wasn't that. Their relationship was a lot more familial. It was a lot more about them feeling that it was a brother and sister relationship. A relationship with someone that you felt understood you and that you understood. That there was a unique connection and understanding of each other. That in a way she was his one and only ally, he felt, in this whole life that he was living. And she was in many ways someone that he admired, something that he aspired to be. And I get the sense that his rescuing her wasn't just about his feelings for her. It was also that kind of idea that if she can't be saved, then it's all useless, right? She, being such a great thing, has to be able to be saved. And that goes a long way to explain Orphen's actions throughout the book, because there are times where you kind of are like, man, you should probably give up now. Yeah, you should let this go. But I will say this about Orphen, and in particular you see this towards the end of the book. He is still a realist. He is still pragmatic about what he needs to do. And that was something that I liked as well, was that he has his own self-awareness. He knows that he is strong, but he knows that he's not stronger than many others. He knows that he could be stronger, but because he turned his back on the teachings of the Tower of Fangs, because he left early, he has not risen to his full potential. He knows that he turned his back on a very promising, powerful, and potentially rich future, all for the sake of trying to rescue this person that he cares about. And in that way, he makes it a very relatable character, because he is pursuing something that is more important than just power and money. He is pursuing something that is more about morals and values that, you know, go beyond that material wealth. So I really liked Orphen as a character, and even the way that he kind of put up with these other characters and dealt with them and everything else. It made him a character that you could relate to and a character that you could root for. And as I said, even at times that you began to doubt him, there was still enough of that realism that came into it that you were kind of like, okay, you still have your head somewhat screwed on. We're not going too off the rails here. But like I said, what really makes this story to me was the ending. Because I'll be honest, as much as I enjoyed the book and as much as I enjoyed the magic battles and stuff like that happened through the book, there were some things that just logically to me didn't make a lot of sense. And I can't really get into specifics because those would be huge spoilers. But there were a couple things that I asked myself going through the book, like, why would you do this when you could have just done this, which seems a lot easier? That all becomes a lot more apparent when you get to the end. In fact, the ending has probably one of the better twists that I've seen in a light novel recently. And actually kind of elevated my opinion of the whole book and made me much more interested and excited about reading more in this series going forward. So overall, Sorcerous Stabber Orphen, you know what? It actually really holds up. As I said, there's a bunch of stuff that we see in a ton of recent light novels that it lacks because that really wasn't a thing back in 1994, but But all the stuff that it has are so classic and timeless for the fantasy genre that you really don't notice that. I mean, I only notice it because I read so many light novels. But if you're looking for something that is just more of a pure fantasy, you don't want the isekai, you're tired of the, oh, look at a magic window popped up in my brain and this voice said to me, you've leveled up. You know, like, if you're tired of that kind of stuff and you're like, but you still like sorcery, you still like swords, you still like people kicking butt, this is actually a really good series to check out. It's got all of those things. So overall, like I said, if you're looking for something that's pure fantasy that kind of gets away from a lot of the stuff we're seeing and the sort of current trends of light novels, this one's definitely worth checking out. So those are my thoughts on volume number 1 of Sorcerous Stabber Orphen. My next review is going to be part of my trying to catch up with the pile, and that's going to be volume number 13 of Sword Art Online, Alicization Dividing. What was I saying about game mechanics in fantasy worlds? Yeah, but at least this one, you know, works because it is a game. It's not like a actual world, so I'll let it get away with it. So that's going to be my next review. So if you love light novels and you're brand new to the channel, you should subscribe because I do reviews like this every week, as well as countdowns of the most popular light novels in Japan, and the Light Novel Podcast gets posted to this channel too. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.